All right, here we go with section 2, Dose of Arsenic. The acquisition of the vast Mexico territory raised a fatal issue that would disrupt America's political system and drive the nation to civil war, whether slavery would expand into the West. Ralph Waldo Emerson predicted that if the United States took parts of Mexico, it will be as the man who swallows arsenic. Mexico will poison us. Events proved him right. The bonds of union were already fraying as Methodists and Baptists, the largest evangelical churches, divided into southern and northern branches in 1844 and 1845. But the entrance of the slavery issue into the heart of politics as a result of the Mexican War dissolved perhaps the strongest force for national unity, the two-party system. Before 1846, the status of slavery throughout the United States had been settled either by state law or the Missouri Compromise. But the conquest of Mexico reignited the question of slavery's expansion. In 1846, Pennsylvania Congressman David Wilmot introduced a bill prohibiting slavery from the territory acquired from Mexico. Party lines collapsed. Every Northerner, Whig and Democrat, supported the Wilmot Proviso. Almost all Southerners opposed it. The measure passed the House, which had a Northern majority, but stalled in the Senate, which was evenly split between free and slave states. In 1848, opponents of slave expansion organized the Free Soil Party and nominated Martin Van Buren for president. Democrats that year nominated Lewis Cass, who suggested that settlers in new territories be allowed to vote on the slavery question, an idea later called popular sovereignty. Van Buren received 14% of the North's total votes. The Whig candidate and Mexican war hero Zachary Taylor won the presidential election. But the Free Soil Party made anti-slavery a political force to be reckoned with. The Free Soil position was far more popular in the North than abolitionist demands for immediate emancipation and equal rights for blacks. While Congress had no constitutional power to abolish slavery within a state, precedents such as the Northwest Ordinance and the Missouri Compromise existed for keeping territories free of slavery. Many in the North long resented what they saw as Southern domination of the federal government. Preventing the creation of new slave states appealed to those who wanted policies such as the tariff and government aid to internal improvements, which most Southern political leaders opposed. For many Northerners, Western territories promised economic advancement and prosperity. Economic crisis in the 1840s reinforced the old link between land ownership and economic freedom. Some in the labor movement saw access to Western land as a means of fighting unemployment and low wages in the East. If slave plantations took up Western lands, free Northern migration would be blocked. Free soil had a double meaning. The Free Soil Platform of 1848 called on the federal government to bar both slavery from Western lands and offer free homesteads to settlers in the new territories. Unlike abolitionism, free soil did not challenge widespread Northern racism. To many in the white South, barring slavery from the territory seemed a violation of the equal rights of Southerners, some of whom had fought and died in the Mexican War. They complained that the federal government had no right to keep them from bringing one kind of property, their human property, into the territories. With older slave states suffering from soil exhaustion, Southern leaders believed that slavery needed to expand to survive. They opposed the admission of new free states that would overturn the balance between sections in Congress and make free states a permanent majority. In world history, 1848 is remembered as the springtime of nations, a moment of democratic uprisings against Europe's monarchies and demands by ethnic minorities for national independence. American principles of liberty and self-government seemed to triumph in Great Britain, France, Hungary, Italy, and Germany, where people rebelled against monarchy and clamored for national unification and republican rights and constitutions. But in most places, these uprisings were defeated. Many Americans wondered whether their republic would survive. Party leaders tried to resolve the sectional differences over slavery, threatening to tear the nation apart. In 1850, California applied for statehood as a free state. Many Southerners opposed it, fearing that its admission would upset the sectional balance in Congress. Henry Clay offered a plan with 4 provisions that came to be known as the Compromise of 1850. California would enter as a free state, the slave trade, but not slavery, would be abolished in Washington, D.C., a new law would allow Southerners to reclaim fugitive slaves, slavery status in the rest of the territories taken from Mexico would be decided by local white inhabitants, and the United States would pay off Texas's massive debt accumulated while independent. The Senate compromise debate expressed the sectional divides eloquently. Webster announced his willingness to abandon the Wilmot Proviso and accept the new fugitive slave law to keep peace. And though Calhoun was too ill to speak, a colleague read his remarks amounting to a denial of compromise and insistence that the national government protect slavery by expanding it into all new territory. If the North did not yield, the Union could not survive. But William H. Seward of New York also refused to yield and denounced Southerners' talk of their constitutional rights when a higher law than the Constitution, the law of morality, condemned slavery. His voice represented abolitionism in the Senate. President Taylor, like Jackson, a Southerner but nationalist, was alarmed by disunion. He accused the Southern leaders of holding California hostage to their own goals and argued that Congress should go ahead with the state's admission. But Taylor died suddenly in July 1850, and his successor, Millard Fillmore of New York, supported Clay's proposals, helping to break the impasse with the Compromise of 1850. Though it seemed that national leaders had again succeeded in removing slavery from national politics, the new Fugitive Slave Act made further controversy inevitable. It allowed special federal commissioners to determine the fate of alleged fugitives without jury trials or testimony from accused individuals. It prohibited local authorities from interfering with fugitive slaves' capture and required individual citizens to assist in such capture when called on by federal agents. Thus, Southern leaders, usually committed to states' rights and local autonomy, supported a law that brought federal agents into Northern communities and allowed them to override local law enforcement and local judicial procedure. The fugitive slave issue affected all free states, not just states bordering the South. The issue drew into politics many who had been anti-slavery but now feared that the South was forcing them to act against their own consciences. In the 1850s, federal tribunals heard more than 300 cases and ordered the return of 157 fugitive slaves to the South. But the law exacerbated sectional enmity. In dramatic confrontations, fugitives, helped by abolitionists, violently resisted recapture, sometimes killing slave owners and attacking federal authorities. Several thousand Northern blacks, free and fugitive, fled to safety in Canada. A Toronto newspaper noted that families are separating in order to flee to freedom under the British flag in Canada, a protection denied them in the Free Republic. The Compromise of 1850 attempted to settle the issues arising from acquisition of territory from Mexico. The Compromise of 1850 seemed to restore sectional peace and party unity. Franklin Pierce, a Democrat, bested Winfield Scott, the Whig candidate, in the 1852 presidential race on a platform recognizing the compromise as having settled the slavery question. But under Pierce, the party system established in the era of Jackson collapsed. In early 1854, Illinois Senator Stephen A. Douglas introduced a bill to provide territorial governments for Kansas and Nebraska, part of the Louisiana Purchase. Douglas desired Western economic development, and while he hoped a transcontinental railroad could be built through Kansas or Nebraska, he did not think this could happen unless formal governments existed in these territories. Southerners did not want these new territories to be free states, which might upset the national balance. Douglas tried to mollify them by proposing that slavery status would be settled by popular sovereignty, by local voters, not Congress. Yet slavery was prohibited in Kansas and Nebraska territories by the Missouri Compromise, which Douglas's bill would repeal. Anti-slavery Democrats protested Douglas's bill as a plot to convert free territory to slavery and helped convince many in the North that Southerners wanted to extend slavery throughout the entire West. Though Douglas secured the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, the law shattered the Democratic Party. Many Northern Democrats voted against the bill. In the bill's aftermath, the Whig Party, unable to forge a response, dissolved. The South became almost entirely Democratic. Most Northern Whigs, joined by many disaffected Northern Democrats, joined a new organization dedicated to ending slavery's expansion, the Republican Party. So that's our second section. We'll be back for the third next.